Hello and welcome. Today we're speaking to an Australian automotive component supplier who's pivoted into new markets. We've got Al D'Alberto and his son Tony speaking about the Bellmont business.
Let's jump into it.
With 30 years' experience in auto logistics and state-of-the-art locations in 5 major Australian cities, Precar Fleet Services are a premier all-in-one solutions provider for commercial vehicle fleet operators, leasing companies and original equipment manufacturers. Please visit precar.com.au and click on the link to Fleet Services.
Thanks very much for joining us today. Great to have you both on the show. Can you maybe tell us about Bellmont and the type of products and how you got into the business?
It goes back a long way. It started with my brother's original business was panel beating, and over the years it evolved into becoming a supplier of painted components to the automotive industry. So our first major customer was HSV, and later on we took on Tickford and Mitsubishi and Toyota as in their special vehicle department. We weren't just a painting company though, we were sort of more of a logistics company. So what we would do is the customer would select the moulder, develop components like bumper bars or spoilers, and once that was signed off, we would then take over the logistics of purchasing, value adding, and then shipping to their production line, which was JIT, just-in-time system. It was our responsibility not to run them short of parts, so we had to make sure we had plenty of stock, and it was processed to a high standard, so there was no rejects, and it sort of grew from there. So that was the early days of our company. When the automotive industry unfortunately wound up, we then basically had to reinvent ourselves. We were lucky that we had a good relationship with Holden, and that's how we were introduced to Victoria Police to take on board the Divvy Van program, which was the VE Commodore. So from that we developed the pod, and each time they get a new platform, we get to modify the pod. So it's the prisoner compartment is still the original compartment made back in the VE days, but then we change the substructure so it attaches to different types of vehicles. And now we actually fit quarter panels, and so it looks like an original OE body, but in fact it's fiberglass, and it's a capsule of itself, which they can then swap as the vehicle runs out of mileage. They can swap that pod from the next straight onto the next vehicle. So it gives some of the pods are probably around 14, 15 years old. So from a cost perspective, they've been very efficient.
That's a really great story for taxpayers. It's a great story for the police. And it's a great story for General Motors, because there would have been a lot of cars that would have churned through with your pod on the back there. And a great story for the police because the pod had such incredible innovations designed into it. I think what you guys did with that, especially that door that the prisoners can't kick open and hurt the police officers, the storage for the bulletproof vests so that they weren't compromised, the gun racks, all that sort of stuff. There's a lot that goes into that pod. The ventilation system, the safety features for even seatbelts. There's so much in that pod, and I've got to say it's a credit to you, Al, and the team for putting together such a comprehensively reliable and super efficient prisoner transport vehicle that's also protected so many road users and also police officers.
Yeah, it was really a team thing between ourselves, Holden and Victoria Police. I've got to say, Victoria Police through Frank Manelli was the driving force for the concept, which I think is a very clever one, because you're not just bolting a body on a car, and the interaction is not, for example, not safe to drive. Everything's done with that in mind, safety of the police officers. And there's lots of areas which aren't sort of obvious, but there's a lot of detail in those cars that people you don't see, but it's integrating it into the core vehicle. And we like to take some of the credit, but it was definitely a team effort between ourselves and Holden in the early days. And now we're working closely with the Ford Motor Company to achieve the same sort of results.
So Al, we mentioned Ford and Holden. So as far as your target customers going forward, what experiences or who are you targeting now? And what experiences do they have with their products? We talked about the police pod. What other products and going forward, what sort of work is your business targeting with Bellmont?
Well, we do a small lightweight caravan, but it's low volume. It's a niche product. It's more designed for retirees. It's easy to tow. It's longevity. The reliability of it's quite high. We use a lot of automotive technology in what we build. As far as other markets go, we do supply military police vehicles. We've just recently been awarded a program for, again, the military, building bomb squad cars or vehicles. So that's the area we'd like to push our business to grow it in that direction.
Because going back to the turnaround in your business, that must have been quite a big thing for your company to be supplying just in time and you must have had quite a significant operation for that, and then suddenly to change it. How did you go through that process?
Well, it's not an easy process to go through. They talk about reinventing yourself, but to be honest, it's easier said than done. But what we did, we looked at the skills we had, the areas that what we considered were good at, and we targeted customers like Victoria Police, caravans, to try and continue with the skills that we currently had and improve the products that we got involved in. Otherwise, you're wasting 30, 40 years of knowledge. And that's what's, unfortunately, the closing of the car industry's done. It's put all that knowledge at jeopardy. So it's important to work out how to apply it to other fields, because the car industry, as tough as it was very innovative, taught you a lot of disciplines, but general production or manufacturing doesn't have the same level of expertise. So the Australian car industry was a very good example of relatively low volume, but very innovative. And it's important that we hang on to those skills, because Australia is not like America where you've got massive volume. So you've got to be able to do good quality products, but do it efficiently and as cost effective as you can.
It's interesting, Al. John and I have been doing a lot of work with a lot of peripheral suppliers that were suppliers to the auto industry. And I must admit, I'm a career GM guy. I spent nearly 20 years there and in dealerships and even other car companies. But fundamentally, GM was a juggernaut. And it's interesting with the work that we've been doing since. We've always heard of how many suppliers there are to the auto industry and the skills, and we shouldn't lose it because we'll lose that skill base. It is absolutely mind-blowing, and I've been speaking as a OEM now, working with suppliers such as yourselves and other suppliers. It's incredible how deep that skill set actually ran. And there are tool makers, there are people like yourselves that make custom components. There'd be one operator in Morty Alec that would just make a bumper clip for, say, Nissan. And that was a whole business of 4 or 5 people was surrounding that one bumper clip. And then he'd make a bumper clip for the Camry. So it was incredible that we had that innovation, that skill set. So that person had a sparker rotor that could pivot and make something really quickly for someone else whilst he's still making those bumper clips. And then we still had this broader skill set that we don't want to lose as a country, because we know that when we get isolated through a pandemic, we need to draw on people like yourselves to start producing particular items that may have been imported for a brief moment of time, but suddenly a supply chain gets disrupted and you lose that IP, and it has to come back. And there is a swing. We're seeing a swing with a number of suppliers and manufacturers that we speak to, and small and medium. Defence is a big part, and we see the defence sector just keeping on getting bigger and bigger, and that is actually flowing on to other sub-assemblies. Like there are manufacturers even here in Melbourne, not far from where you are, that just make one part of an F-18, and that's made here. Just one part of the suspension. That's it. But there's probably 50 or 60 people that make that one component. So these are things that we can't afford to lose as a country. And it's great that you've drawn on your expertise, maintained it, and now pivoting and doing other projects with sectors that really need your skills. Now, because the next question I was keen to ask then, on the back of that, so what problems do you solve for your customers? So if you say, right, we're targeting this customer, how can we help? How do you help them? What problems do you solve for them?
Our philosophy, Mark, is a lot of our customers are retailers. So we're just part of a chain of products that end up in the retail world. And I've always had the attitude that it's important that our customer is successful and seen to be successful from the buyer or the retail world. So the more successful we can make that entity and be part of that chain, the better chance there'll be repeat business. So we always worked on quality. In the paint industry, when we were sort of in the thick of that, our reject rate was less than 1%. So that is an extremely high rate of quality, particularly in the painting industry. And so we always pushed quality. That was our biggest thing, and reliability. Because if you haven't got components when you're manufacturing, you're wasting a lot of money. It's costing you money to sit around and do nothing. So it's very important that the parts, when they get delivered, they get used and they never get seen again, because you don't want reworks, you don't want warranty claims. And that was our focus, and that's what we try to add to that's what not only do we make a part or paint a part, but we're also trying to make sure that the delivery system is faultless and consistent.
He's being very modest, Mark. the amount of experience that he has, it's probably hard to describe. And myself personally, I've been with the business now for probably 3 or 4 years, back full time, and I'm on a big journey of an apprenticeship. And you couldn't put down on paper the stuff that he teaches me daily, and just some of the lessons learned over time that keep popping up when we take on new projects, and things that he will point out that I haven't even thought of yet. And I think, that'll be all right, and the next minute it bites me. So some of that sort of industry experience is very hard to replicate. And guys with, Dad's experience in the industry aren't around anymore. They are a dying breed. And you don't find a lot of people with that sort of experience. So I'm pretty lucky to have him by my side, teaching me the ways of the business and the industry. I don't know if I'll ever get there, but I've certainly got a good teacher.
Tony, I think you say it's such an important part, and that's why I think it's so sad that we've lost all this manufacturing for the automotive industry. And it's fortunate that we have businesses such as yourself still there, because it's just, there's tremendous knowledge in that, and you can't go and study that in a book or study that at university. It's stuff that's handed. It's only you know how to do that and hand that on. It's through your experience and knowledge. So I think it's such an important part of the business.
But I think where it began for Dad and his brothers was having a real passion for cars and automotive. Tinkering with cars in the backyard, pulling them down, fixing them up from a very young age. That's where they've got a huge passion for the industry, and then just grew from there. They're lucky enough to live their dream of working with cars, and that's why they're so passionate about it. I think that goes a long way, especially in the early days when you're doing lots of hours. probably not getting paid what you should be. But the business that was built, Bellmont in its heyday, had over 100 staff working 3 shifts. It was quite a big business. And while it's not quite that right now, it's building itself back up for sure. More paint work, more fiberglass work, working with local industries. We're sort of on that rise again. So it hasn't been an easy journey for Dad, and he probably doesn't talk about it enough. But when the automotive industry did crash and GFC and all that sort of stuff, it was a big shift, a huge shift for the brothers, and it was driven, by Dad and his brothers to try and push in a new direction. Obviously, we had the car dealerships as well. So everything we've always done has always been around automotive, and it served us really well. And suddenly it was sort of disappearing. But now, we've diversified and, used that word pivot, which everyone used during COVID, and gone in a slightly different direction. And it's starting to sort of pay dividend, but we're also probably realising now we sort of need to probably focus in on probably one direction a little bit more rather than having our fingers in so many pies. So that's the challenge that we do face going forward. And it'd be interesting to hear, or hear, your stories of what you sort of think what we specialise in could sort of go, which direction we could go.
Yeah, because that was leading into that next question, is what do you see as the big challenges for the industry? Is it trying to get apprentices and train them? As you grow, there's not a wealth of experienced guys out there that you can just go and steal from a competitor. You must have to grow your experience internally, or am I wrong?
No, that's something that we work on every day, trying to pass on the knowledge that we have here. For example, one of our painters has been here for almost 30 years. He's extremely good painter, absolute best here, which is great, but there's a timeline to that. And, we're trying to work on the next generation of spray painters that can learn from him. And he started with us when he was obviously very young, and he was basically rubbing bumpers back. So he learned the process from the start, and now he understands what's really important to paint a bumper bar, for instance. We've got guys that specialise in the caravan industry, fiberglass. But I suppose the benefit Dad has is he has a very good understanding of all the different aspects. Might not be able to throw a gun around like Brendan can, who's been here for 30 years. But when there is a problem, he can diagnose it. And that's, I suppose, where someone with less experience like myself has a bit of learning to do to try and gain that experience. But being on the factory floor, I think really helps that, and getting in amongst it and trying to solve the problems and listening to some of the solutions. But definitely trying to find that next generation. It's a bit of a dying art, spray painting especially, fiberglassing. There's not a lot of people around that want to take on that challenge anymore. They want to sit behind a computer and work from home.
One thing we learned in the early days was you can, for example, if we take spray painters as the example, you could advertise for a spray painter and they would come along and they didn't quite meet our standards that we were aiming for, and would always cause a bit of friction because they thought you were over the top, you're expecting too much. So we learned from those days we're better off training in-house so that the person has no other expectation than what we're expecting to deliver, and they just strive to get to that level. So that it becomes a natural thing for them to do. And we always found people with passion. If they love motor cars or whatever, they were more willing to learn the trade. So from my point of view, one of the biggest mistakes that was made in manufacturing in Australia was to stop TAFE colleges and stop training apprentices, and because at the end of the day, they're just as important as other jobs or other types of people. So why don't they get the accolades they deserve in the industry? So that's where I think there was a mistake made. And if we're going to turn the industry around, we've got to get that back happening again, where people want to be involved and they want to strive for quality. And it
seemed to be an industry to get involved in rather than not.
That is a challenge. It's actually great to see. We're doing a bit of work with some TAFEs right now, and it's great to see the TAFEs are actually investing. The government's actually giving TAFEs money for new machinery, new equipment, and expanding facilities. We're seeing, we will visit a TAFE, and some of the machines they'll have in their fabrication or their engineering areas are from the 1980s or even older. And it's great that they're updating to something a bit more modern with the latest technology and to get the skill sets. But yeah, it's interesting that you talk about the getting of the people. But as far as the industry, the pivoting, other than getting trades, what other challenges do you see with the industry? Is it finding that niche other than, say, the defence and allied clients, or is it the caravan business? You've got defence. Is there any other issues or challenges you see facing the industry going forward? Is there going to be more imports, or is exchange rate an issue? I'm just keen to get your thoughts as to what some of the challenges would be.
Well, I think, Mark, price is always an important issue when you're buying something. You're always looking at price. People don't seem to look at the longevity as much as they used to. It's more of a price point. So when you've got the living standards that the Australians have, it's very hard to compete with some of these other countries that, the living standard, the wages aren't as high. So you've got to be more niche, in my view, unless you've got a global, business to be able to survive. So you can maintain a margin and produce a quality part that people appreciate, or quality product that people appreciate. So it is difficult when you're up against some of the imports and some of the pricing and the thing I find is a lot of people will buy on sight unseen now. They'll buy something off the net, whereas I would never do that. I'd want to touch and feel before I bought it. So the way I buy products is probably not the new way of buying products. So that's why I need someone like Tony to guide me in that area and understand the buying public of today, as opposed to what the buying public was when we were younger and we were the main people buying goods in the country. So,
but boomers are still the main consumers.
Yeah, they are. But people, like I say, people will buy stuff off the net with sight unseen, and
I don't think it really makes a huge difference to our business, though, for what we're doing.
Yeah, well, because we're a bit niche, because we've sort of targeted. We've been really lucky. We've always had really good, high quality customers. Like Kenworth Trucks, like HSV, like Gold Acres. They're another Australian manufacturer that make spray machinery for crop spraying, and we make a fiberglass bonnet for that company, and they're actually based in Ballarat. And it's all about quality, quality product, and I'm amazed they actually sell, I think, about 8 to 10 of these units a month, and they're $500,000 each. So they are a successful company.
At the moment, they're actually going 12 a month. So it's massive, and no sign of really slowing down. And when you go and have a look at these things, they're absolute monsters of machines, in the factory. The component that we make is big for us, but probably small for them. But it is good to support a local industry. And when you go up to Ballarat, they've got so many of the locals working there. And they openly say if they get more, they would build more.
And in terms of countries that you face, you're talking about price competition in it. Is that coming from like China, or is it Europe, or where do you face that competition from?
Well, if you look at the caravan industry, there's a lot of Chinese imports now coming into the country. And you see a lot of them at the shows. You see a lot of Asian people walking around, looking at other products, and I'm sure they're assessing potentials for themselves. So the more that happens, and it becomes a price fight, I guess. So unless you can produce at the same price point that they can, it is a bit difficult to compete with them. Hence why our product's very niche. It's a low volume, but we try and maintain a margin in it to sort of make it viable for us to keep building. The police divvy vans, well, they'll only deal with a local supplier anyway because of what's required to get their vehicles on the road. It'd be very hard to, and the volume for a Chinese manufacturer was probably not big enough to warrant their interest in it. So I think that's the thing. If you can make a niche product that's, good quality, I think you'll survive.
And it's interesting, Al, and Tony, I think you really sum it up perfectly using the police as an example. So the police pod is 15 years old. So if you think of if someone had bought, say, a pod that was, say, 20% less than what the actual police pod was, it would still cost them more to buy that pod and operate it than it would be to buy yours. Because the evidence is there. You've got 15 years and continuing of use out of this pod. In fact, the cars that they were originally fitted to are probably all well and truly scrap metal now, because the pod is continuing and the utes that they were fitted to have either probably been written off or turned into scrap metal or now on blocks being a collector's item. So it's just interesting. It's a credit to, and as evidenced by the pod, that you're an Australian success story that can really target and provide a very high quality product that's tailored to a specific need. And you're right, that can pivot to any industry, to any customer, whether it be the police, whether it be a big seeding manufacturer in Ballarat or some of these huge broadacre product fabricators in central New South Wales and all this sort of stuff. So there's evidence and opportunities in the Australian market, and also they don't underestimate the export markets with that knowledge that you've got and the ability for you to pivot, Tony, there you go, and do small volumes and export. So I'm just, because the next question I was going to ask is, what does the future hold for Bellmont and the products that you produce? But I'm just sort of thinking off the top of my head, I can see so much. It's great, and it's great to see the energy of Tony in the business. Al's expertise, Tony's expertise and vigour and marketing acumen. That right, okay, here's the opportunity to take a business to the next level with a whole heap of different target markets. So I'm keen for your thoughts on that one.
Going back to the pod, it's been around for 14 years, but some of those pods have probably seen up to 100 cars. So if you amortise the cost of that pod over that number of cars, it's actually quite a cheap item.
Correct.
It's only cheap because it's lasted so long and it's been able to be used over and over again. If the quality wasn't there and the thing was, worn out after two applications, then it becomes an expensive product. So that's our philosophy, try and make it last and try and get as much value out of it as you possibly can. And, it even goes to saving the planet, because you're not remaking the thing over and over again. It's actually good for the environment. So it's got a green credentials as well, but it's not obvious though, because it's not advertised that way. But it's that sort of mentality that will help all these factors keep costs down, look after the environment. It's fit for purpose, because every time we fit it to a new vehicle, we lift the standard of it. For example, the current Ranger that we're fitting it to, we use all their safety features, the taillights have got sensors in them. Well, the taillights are mounted in exactly the same position as the standard vehicle. So all those features are still operational. We don't interfere with any of that side of it. So it's getting more sophisticated every time we fit it to a new vehicle.
It's interesting. We often get cars back that have been written off. Because of these pods, they can actually use them for pursuit work. So they're rated, I think it's silver rated, which means the police can do pursuit work with them. Occasionally things go wrong, and we get the car back, and the car will be written off completely. Windscreen smashed, roof, caved in, and the pod itself generally just has a few scratches on it, and we can pull the pod off and put on another car. So they are very strong, and that's the beauty of the fiberglass material. But they do cop an absolute hiding. I mean, a lot of these cars, once they're finished in the field, I think they go to auction afterwards, and the seats are torn up from when the police are getting in there with their their guns on their hips, and they basically run them 24 hours a day, and they're absolutely cactus, the cars. But the pods themselves are still, give them a washout and a clean up and a repaint, and they come up pretty much brand new again. So I think price per wear has been pretty decent. But we definitely do see all sorts of things here when the pods come back to us with shoes in the back and all sorts of equipment that some of the prisoners are left in there. But a lot of effort does go into designing in a certain way. Things that you wouldn't think about when you're taking a prisoner to certain locations. There's things that they actually get up to in the back of the pod. When they're on whatever they're on, or they're intoxicated. Then we need to wash them out. They need to. Sometimes the police need to spray them, so we need to have access points for that. They've got air conditioning, these pods. So if it's too hot, they get looked after as well. All the cameras, they can talk to them from the cabin. So they're pretty sophisticated, probably more than what you'd expect. I think people think you just chuck them in the back of a ute and take them to the police station. Well, those sort of times have definitely moved on.
Just one question, maybe directed at you, Tony. You said the business is growing and you want to grow the business. Have you put any sort of figures around that? Have you thought, well, if we could double the size of the business over the next 10 years or triple the size, where's your goal? What do you want to get out of it?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and something that we do talk about regularly, to the point where, we're actively looking for a new facility to try and have a bit more space to be able to cope with the volume that we have. Looking at different people to introduce to the business to try and increase sales and to be able to cope with some of that workflow. But I am probably at my age, I'm probably not as invested in the caravan side of things because it's not what I like to go and do myself. I see there's a lot of growth in the police side of it and our pod work, getting into other states if we can. That's not an easy task and a bit of a slow journey, that one. But it's something that we've already, trying to take on. If we could do that, that would really sort of expand the business and I think keep utilising the skills that we've got here without reinventing the wheel. I think that would be a really, really good direction for our business.
No, it's I've actually jotted three main phases, if you like, for just what you've described. There's the law enforcement, whether it be state, federal, or other. There's the defence. So there's a defence and associated manufacturers and fabricators. And then the last one's the agricultural equipment, because you've already got a foot in the door there. And even those, they're those, I think, the three main streams locally. But then don't discount the opportunity to do exactly all those three streams internationally. Because with the dollar at 65, it's actually not a bad opportunity going the other way into the US or into Europe with the euro at 60. It's actually quite cost effective to go the other way. So, but differentiating as the premium, and that's the key, because you're premium, you're low volume, but you're also high quality. So if you're looking for if a customer's looking for some, and I'll use an example of going back to show my age here, Al, when the Corvette had Australian brakes on it because it was easier and more cost effective. The brakes made down here in East Bentley back in 1984 went onto the Corvette because there was a bit lower volume but higher quality and higher expectations of performance. It was better to get the braking system from Australia than it was from, say, a US manufacturer who basically were saying, the volume's too low. Like, we would kill for Corvette volume, but that's an example of basically who you are. That's why I said anyway, that you're basically that supplier.
I mean, if I put a weakness on our company, it's getting that exposure, that ability to sell ourselves to things like the American market. And we've identified that weakness, and we are actually working on now how to fix that problem so that it can open new horizons, because there's only so many police vehicles in Australia. So it's the ceiling's quite low relatively to what's available out there. So that's, for our business, that's the challenge, to work out how to get ourselves out in the big bad world, I guess, if you want to call it that way, and expose ourselves to other markets and other volumes. Because I think we've got the skills, we've got the drive, we've got a very good engineering team here, very clever, young guy, very smart. So I think that side of it we can deal with. It's opening the doors. It's for us the tough part.
Yeah, because just thinking off the top of my head, I lived in Finland for 6-7 years, and the police there, because you got air conditioning, but there they need heating, and their big problem is the guys get very drunk and they can't leave them out, because if they fall over and go to sleep, they'll die. So the police go around and pick guys up and just get them in the van and take them down to the police station. But their vans are like a minibus, and that's the type of vans they use. But it'd be interesting to run the cost between just putting them on the back of your pod on the back of a ute compared to, using a sort of a minibus type concept. Because the snow conditions and that, they probably could do better with a 4x4, or a ute.
See, the Victoria Police, they've developed a product, or they've spec'd up a product that is multi-purpose. It's not only can you put a prisoner in the back, but you can do pursuit work. And the officers live in these cars 24/7, basically. So they've got to be comfortable, they've got to be easy to drive. And if there's a situation where they've got to chase somebody, that vehicle's capable of doing it. So it's actually quite multifunctional, that vehicle. It's not just a divvy van. And what we find, ours will take 2 prisoners in the back, but it's probably pretty rare where you'd want to put more than 2 prisoners in there, because most of the time you're picking up people that are, fighting or, so you don't necessarily want to put them in the same space, So that's where the divvy van is quite strong, in the fact that it can chase someone down, apprehend them, put them in the back and take them back to a police station. Now, they've got air conditioning, they've got lots of safety features from a duty of care scenario, whereas not every jurisdiction thinks that way. And that's where I think Victoria Police have been quite innovative in the way they operate.
I'd see plenty of upside. I see plenty of upside, especially if you look at those key themes: military and police, as far as law enforcement, agriculture. Those 3 main themes really come through quite strongly. And also, don't underestimate still supplying automotive in other markets, or even domestically. There still will be need for bespoke automotive components, especially with the customisation that is just going crazy with medium pickups and the like.
No, thanks very much. I really enjoyed that. It's fascinating to listening to what you've done and what you've achieved.
Thanks for listening. Hopefully you got as much out of the conversation with Al D'Alberto regarding Bellmont and the supply of sub-assembly to the auto industry, and also into the military and other caravan industries. Plenty of scope. Automotive and supply is not dead.
Thanks very much for watching. Please subscribe to our channel, either on YouTube or one of our audio channels. And we'll talk to you again next week.